Late last month, as I watched President Biden flail in his first presidential debate against Donald Trump, I kept telling people I wanted just one thing: a peek at the texts of just about any elected official to confirm, were they seeing what I was seeing? So when I called up Congressman Mike Quigley this week, I straight up asked, what was going on in your DMs that night?
I was getting a ton of texts and messages and phone calls from constituents, friends, family, staff.
What were they saying to you?
Different waves of panic, a lot of WTF.
Congressman Quigley is a Democrat, represents Illinois' 5th district, which is part of Chicago and its suburbs. He's been on the Hill for 15 years. He says the debate was sad for him to watch, like it was for a lot of people.
And I thought the worst part of this was the visual at the end of the debate, after the debacle that it was, with First Lady walking him across the stage and him needing her help to get downstairs.
But afterwards, Representative Quigley didn't just wring his hands in private. Instead, he started showing up on cable news. At first, he simply implied he was open to a new nominee for president. After a few days, though, he got more blunt, saying Biden simply can't be at the top of the ticket.
One of the first bits of advice I got in politics is, you're barking with the big dogs now, get over it.
What does that mean in this context?
It basically means this is the big time and you can't let it be too big for you, right? You're there. You can do something about it. And that's my message to everybody out there. There's no walking away from this. You're concerned, double down, get more involved.
It's interesting you use that word double down to me because there are a couple ways to take that, right? You could take it the way the White House is taking it, which is like, saddle up, we're riding with Biden. And then there's a different way, which is the path you've taken. You're one of just 6 House members who publicly called on Biden to resign.
My message to everyone else is, whatever you're doing, do twice as much to help the cause.
I reached Representative Quigley at a strange time. After a handful of politicians like him had gone public with their concerns, Democratic members of Congress all got in a room to privately hash things out at DNC headquarters. This was Tuesday morning. To the reporters staking this meeting out, it certainly looked like the president was consolidating his support. Congressional leader Jerry Nadler told reporters, we have to support Joe Biden, despite having misgivings just a few days back. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, the matter is closed. Joe Biden is our nominee. This vibe shift, though, did not seem to be bugging Representative Quigley.
This is a process. We take different times to get to where we need to get. I respect that. Everyone follows a different path. This is unprecedented. It has, I suspect, freaked people out. But I think they'll get there. My message is, take whatever time you need, but we need to act, and we don't have unlimited time.
Yeah, how long do you think the party has to figure out a way forward?
I think they have to do it before the convention.
That's a generous timeline.
It is, but I'm being realistic again.
You sound confident to me.
I am, because there's enough people running around with their hair on fire. We need some calm, thoughtful voices.
Today on the show, a calm, thoughtful voice who thinks Biden should not be leading the ticket. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
In 1978, gay people in California faced a dire threat.
Proposition 6, the Briggs Initiative.
The teaching profession is riddled with the homosexual element.
John Briggs is going to fire every gay and lesbian school teacher in the state of California.
I'm Christina Cauterucci. This season on Slow Burn, we'll explore how a nationwide backlash against gays and lesbians led to a massive showdown in California.
This was tens of thousands of pissed off gay guys and lesbians roaring down Market Street.
With so much at stake, young people became activists.
We've got to fight back. We can't let this happen in California.
And activists became leaders.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. Listen to the whole season now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Can I ask, when was the last time you saw President Joe Biden in person?
State of the Union. There's actually film and photos of President and I talking and shaking hands on the House floor.
How did he seem at the time?
Thought he had a good night. You know, I will just tell you that it's hard to deny the fact that he appears somewhat frail.
You mean even then he seemed a little frail to you?
Oh, sure. But, you know, part of that's just the reality of the situation.
Him being 81?
Yeah. And I think that's okay. I think he can function very effectively as president. I think the added burden of an extraordinary campaign that will be brutal as it moves forward is probably too much to ask for.
So if President Biden did leave the race, it would throw a huge wrench into the election cycle. So I guess the million-dollar question is, why, in your opinion, does he have to go?
Well, I don't think anything has gotten better since the debate. I think it's gotten worse.
Why do you say that?
Look, I mean, what would be the normal course of actions after that debate? You're on the phone the whole next day. You're doing tons of press with no holds barred. Everything's open. You're pushing back, not by what you're saying, by what you're doing.
You're saying it looks like the president's on the back foot.
He's on his back foot. He's being defensive. And now everything's in the context of the prism of what people saw that night. So I'm not into the speculation that's out there about whatever issues might exist with the president. But the fact is that's what everyone's talking about. Therefore, you're not talking about how bad Donald Trump would be as president. I'm not a pundit, but the polls are going the wrong way in a hurry. Big donors are drying up. The president's underperforming down ballot races. So, you know, that's a recipe for a red wave. And again, you just have to be honest with yourself what the situation is and take the appropriate action.
Yeah. The problem is that the president seems to have made a decision here that he's staying in. He wrote an open letter to elected officials like yourself saying as much. He told people like you who are calling for him to leave the race to go ahead and challenge him at the convention. Are you prepared for that kind of outcome?
No. This is a decision he needs to make, not by a challenge in that manner. And he knows better. I think he's just trying to buy time and hope this all passes. And respectfully, it's not. It's getting worse. And there's a point of no return. So it's tough to do all this because I respect him. This is very hard to do. But it's just being honest with the situation.
You say you're not prepared for chaos at the convention, which will be in your hometown. Do you think about what that convention's going to look like, though? Feels to me like there are a bunch of timelines it could go down.
Sure. Look, before the debate, my concern for the convention was disruption. You know, I'm all for, as we all are, First Amendment rights and, healthy protest. I was concerned that there would be those that take it too far in an attempt to disrupt or commit violence. So those were all concerns I had. I was the lead Democrat getting $75 million for each city to pay for the security involved. So that was before the debate. I think if there's a change, I think the process will take care of itself. There are rules. The president would relinquish his delegates, and then there's a natural national process that follows.
Respectfully, that process from the outside could look like chaos.
And to me, I think it doesn't have to be that way, but I think the first day of a second Trump administration would be very similar to the last days of the first Trump administration. Recall, I was in the room on January 6th. So if you're balancing, it doesn't look good for Democrats versus, a real threat to what I believe is a fragile democracy, and a Supreme Court which has told a lawless president that you got a green light to do whatever the hell you want. So if I'm to balance the greater good any day of the week, I'll take a little intensity at the convention.
If Biden hangs on until the convention, will that be that for you? Like you're on the Biden train?
Oh, look, at some point, if he's a nominee, I'm with him. Because again, the worst day of Joe Biden is better than the best day of Donald Trump.
But I guess the question is, when is it the end of the day, right? Is it the end of the day next month? Is it the end of the day at the convention? Is it the end of the day in September?
Yeah. Look, I'm going to give the economist answer. It depends. And it really does, multiple factors. I'm doing this a day at a time. I wasn't, nobody was trained to be in this position. You just have to assess where we are, listen to people. I'm listening to my constituents. I'm listening to the best political experts I know, legal experts I know, and trying to tell the truth.
I've noticed you making this argument again and again, that the reason you're calling for Joe Biden to leave the race isn't just about the White House, although that's important to you. It's about down ballot races. But it seems to me like you're a strange person to make this argument because you personally are in a seat that the Cook Political Report calls safe, very safe. You're not part of top congressional leadership whose job it is to look out for the majority. Why have you put yourself out there anyway?
The Senate is virtually a tie every term. The House is single-digit control, and we've seen what that does, especially with the Republicans who can't seem to handle the responsibility of power and have a habit of getting rid of their speakers. So the races are going to be tight. The division between power and being in the minority is night and day, and every vote's going to count. So on the presidential years, you really need the top of the ticket to be strong. It will make all the difference. I've heard people even say, well, look, this could be a bad election, but we can correct all this in 2028. I would tell you, not hyperbolic thought here. This could be what we saw as our last totally free and fair election. People say, that's hyperbole. Well, no one would have thought January 6th would happen and the person who instigated would get away from it scot-free and be the president of the United States again. And let's just remember where the Republicans have been on limiting access to the polls. If you give them both houses and the White House, I shudder to think what they would do. And again, we saw people questioning the last election. If you had a free and fair election in 2028, but the House of Representatives was controlled by and the Congress and the president, would they ever certify an election again? Some things could never happen until they do. We always hear this, but this is the most important election of our lives. So I don't want to tell my grandkids that I had my opinion, but I just kept quiet. I'd like to think there'll be more joining me soon. I think that's accurate, but it's going to have to, the pace will have to increase pretty quickly.
We'll be right back. There have been a few different theories about what should happen after a hypothetical Biden drop. One is that there should be some kind of mini primary, and another is that the nomination should just go to Kamala Harris, the vice president. What do you think should happen?
Neither of those are going to happen.
Huh. Why do you say that?
Well, there's just no structure and time and place for there to be whatever primary that people think might exist. So that's just not going to happen. Second, if we want the process to be viewed as legitimate, to simply say we're going to coronate one person over the others, makes that a much tougher sell.
Well, I mean, arguably, Kamala Harris has been the person people elected to be the backup plan for Joe Biden.
Well, that's sure in terms of succession. And do I think Kamala Harris, the vice president, would be a great candidate? Absolutely. I'm just saying that the above all high folks can't just say, oh, it's the vice president. Do I think it's possible that there could be acclamation that, the president says, would you, I'm releasing you, I'm asking you to be with the vice president? Do I think a majority of Democrats would probably be there and supportive? Sure. But that's not the same as saying, ruling from on high, okay, it's going to be the vice president. I just want to make sure the public sees this as a process where people had some input.
Well, don't you think there's a problem of legitimacy no matter what direction it goes? Because you can't redo the primaries.
Yeah, but any number of reasons the nominee can't be the nominee. The Democratic Party has rules and a process.
But in my lifetime, I've never had a bunch of delegates at a convention decide who is going to be my nominee for president. It'll be a new thing.
I know, but isn't that originally what they were supposed to do?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we can survive this. We can't survive Trump round 2. So I hear people stress and say how difficult this would be. Compare it to a second Trump presidency is my answer.
You've predicted in other interviews that this week would be an unfortunately horrible week for Joe Biden. But it seems like to me, I'm watching things slowly shift to an acclamation to Biden staying on the ticket. I'm seeing things like Jerry Nadler, who is a congressman who is widely reported to have said in a phone call with other Democrats that Biden should be off the ticket, coming to a DNC meeting today, Tuesday, and saying he's the nominee. I'm seeing multiple other elected representatives saying this is over. Do you think Biden may have changed the momentum here?
I don't know that he changed the momentum. I think that this process is in flux and that people are continuing to see how it plays out. All I can do is be the voice I am and point out where the American people are and how that affects who's going to sit in the White House and in Congress. So who knows? The way this is going, Friday we might have a much different news line of what's taking place.
Have you ever been in a situation like this in your time in Congress?
No, nothing even remotely close. And can I say that I would rather be doing anything else. I'm the co-chair of the Ukraine caucus, the largest Polish population in the United States. I was going to talk to diaspora in Eastern Europe to try to explain what I think a second Trump presidency would mean to NATO, Eastern Europe, the security of all of Europe, and how they need to be very wary of that.
Yeah, NATO and Ukraine are really important to you. A lot of your constituents come from that area.
And it's important to our national security. I think I'm considered one of the leaders in making sure that we continued funding Ukraine in their war with Russia. But I'm not in that position. We'll see what happens after the convention. Either way, I'm going to be with the nominee, and I'm going to be making those statements. So I'll be ready for any eventuality.
Here's something I keep returning to. Even if the president does change the narrative on Capitol Hill, convince other electeds to get in line behind him, the polling is still quite bad for him.
Yeah, my first message to my colleagues is, and my first message to the White House is, you don't have to convince me. What you should be focusing on is doing what you haven't done so far, and that's actually convincing the American people that this was a single bad episode, as Speaker Emeritus Pelosi referenced. But that's not happening, and I would respectfully suggest it's because the president's not capable of changing that narrative. And the polls won't get better. They'll get worse. He is a shaky base, and I don't think politically he can win back the swing voters that he lost. So that's the ball game.
Are you saying Trump will win if Biden remains in the race?
I think right now it would be very hard to change the tide. Never say never, but you put the Democratic Party in all the races this fall in serious jeopardy by staying in the race.
You know, this week is the NATO summit in Washington, and Biden's got a bunch of public events, including a solo unscripted news conference on Thursday. Are you going to be watching?
You know, depending on what we're doing in our other lives, but obviously every nuance of what the president does from now on is going to be scrutinized. And the fact is, one good or one bad performance isn't going to alter everything. I think it's the trend lines.
Your mind is made up.
I think that my mind is made up. I'm going to be with a nominee. I think a lot of the American public's mind is made up, and it's very hard for this president to overcome that, right? I mean, and as a result, you can't. There's no airspace to talk about how bad Trump would be, and that's one of the great problems with President Biden staying in this race. It doesn't afford us the opportunity to talk about the contrast.
Yeah.
If he has a one good day or one bad day, that's what people are going to say. Oh, whew, he was good this day. Well, how does that make people feel like, well, what's he going to do in September, October, or in the closing days of the campaign when the pressure is just extraordinary? And again, all these races will be razor thin.
It's funny because the Biden camp is saying, you know, don't let one night erase 3.5 years of work. And it sounds like you're saying you can't forget that night.
You can't forget that night, nor the week after. He has dramatically imprinted on the American public's mind that age is the factor. Forgetting how old Trump is, it is cemented in their minds. The very thing most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, were most concerned about. I think that's the issue in a nutshell. He has cemented that in their minds. And that is fundamentally how this is virtually impossible for him to reverse the trends. And the White House and the campaign are in denial about that fact.
Representative Mike Quigley, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Anytime.
Congressman Mike Quigley represents Illinois' 5th District in Chicago and the Chicago suburbs. All right, that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
There was a time when summer surprised us, when galleries opened minds, adventures opened hearts, and we all remained open to whatever the day might offer. It was a time to enjoy. It was summer, this summer at Biltmore. Plan your visit or overnight stay so you can enjoy the marvelous works of Chihuly and savor the season. Reserve now at Biltmore.com.